I am joined by Lauren Mercaldi from Cigna. What we're looking to do, or I'll start out by saying welcome to implementing a messaging strategy for challenging times. Today, we're going to walk you through some best practices for implementing a messaging strategy for challenging times before those challenging times actually hit. I'm Chris Gunn. I'm a Director of Client Partnerships here at Knotch, and I'm excited to be joined this afternoon by Lauren Mercaldi, as I just said. She is the Global Lead for Digital Content Strategy Engagement at Cigna. Lauren is responsible for the Cigna.com content strategy and content lifecycle over most of Cigna's own properties. Over the last 4+ years, Lauren's been instrumental in creating digital content standards and governance processes to ensure consistent messaging and brand tone and voice with Cigna. Today, Lauren's going to share a little bit about her work implementing a messaging strategy with Cigna for challenging times and crisis situations. Her concept overall is to give a plan, or to have a plan laid out prior to ever actually needing it. So when a crisis does hit, you can be quick, agile, decisive, and get your message out ASAP. Because we all know speed and accuracy are critical in crisis situations. So please feel free to type any questions you have in the chat box. We'll try and get to them if we have any time at the end. But without further ado, I'll jump right into it. So, Lauren,
yes,
I guess my first. How are you? Thank you for.
I'm good.
Thank you for joining again. I know we had some technical issues, but here we are and ready to go. But what I'll do is I'll jump right into our first slide and kind of throw a question out there to you, which is, during crisis situations, speed of messaging is important. How have you been able to achieve this here at Cigna?
Yeah, so as you had mentioned in the intro, it's really important that you have a plan and that you just talk about your plan and have it set before a crisis happens. A lot of times a crisis happens and there is a lot of spin about who should message and what the message should be. And that's not the time that you want to try to figure it all out. So I think that there's really 4 steps, which is the 4 steps that we have followed for Cigna. Is, first of all, content should really have a seat at the table. Previously, we've had many occasions where there was a crisis and there was senior leadership and clinical all talking about what the messaging should be, but content was not actually part of that. And so then when the decisions were made, and then everybody's wondering, like, why isn't the content out there? And like, we weren't at the table. So me and my team worked together to come up with a content strategy for messaging. And if you don't have a crisis team or some people in your organization that are already talking about it, my suggestion is that you drive the conversation from the content perspective, and this way you can earn your place at the seat at the table, and people that know you need to be there so that you can really implement the messaging as quick as possible. Another important part is really to know your messaging beforehand, know your brand, and at what points you would message or not message. Again, you want to lay this out beforehand, so you're not questioning and spinning around with everybody else during the time of the crisis when you really should be getting messaging out there. What we had done was we had come up with a messaging strategy, and then we went and had it approved by senior leaders beforehand, so that when a crisis did hit, it wasn't a lot of questionings like, are we going to do this? We're going to do this. We refer right back to the strategy. We told everyone that, it has already been signed off. This is the plan. This is what we're going to do. And we really were able to streamline the process, which normally would have taken 2 days to get messaging out. Or now we can get messaging up within an hour on our .com sites. And part of that speed of production is really your approval process as well. You should be able to identify a few key people that need to sign off on the messaging beforehand. Try to limit the amount of people as much as possible. The most important piece is that when a crisis happens, that you can get the messaging up, get it approved by 1 or 2 people, and get it out there. I've always say that it's not a one and done, right? It's a website. You can change it. Get the messaging out there, and then you can come back and look at it. You can make changes. You can, you'll see later on in the slides when we talk about the coronavirus, how we start out with one strategy, and then we had to move to another as the crisis began to grow. But make sure that you are not trying to run around trying to track people down for approval process. Make sure that you have 1 or 2 people that can give their sign off right away and get it out. For us in particular, it's actually people within our clinical teams that could verify the information, and then it goes right to my team, and then we're able to get it to production. So that's part of the step number 4, is that we train people on my team to actually have access to our backend system. So I have a copywriter that's available or a backup for her at all times through text if it's off hours. She'll write the copy. We have 2 people who get approved by, and then I have another person on my team that has actually the backend system. She'll make the edits, and then it's out within an hour. I would say one thing about a plan, though, is no 2 crises ever seem to be the same. As much as you can plan, you have to be flexible. I think we've all done that this year with all the stuff that was happening. Was, even previously, we messaged for hurricanes or tornadoes, and some would come in and move out, and it really wouldn't be a big deal. But others would linger, or there would be more circumstances behind it. So I would say you want to have a plan so that you can be part of the conversation and so that you can help drive it to production faster. But you also have to look at the plan to see if it makes the most sense for the crisis you're dealing with at that particular moment.
Yeah, that's really interesting and actually really good insight from there. And a lot of it seems elementary, but having a plan in place. But you'd probably, and you're the expert here, but you could probably talk to it more. You'd be surprised how many organizations don't necessarily have this plan in place. So the agility and the speed isn't quite there. And like I alluded to in the beginning, we all know in a crisis situation, being quick, being agile, but being smart about it are some of the most important pieces of your messaging and making sure that you get it out there. So
yeah, absolutely. I think also working when we work in a big organization, it's very siloed, and so it's, even though people know that there's messaging, the dotted lines, it's always in the details, right? And so we can have these great thoughts, but the details about how you get a production, that's the part that needs to be worked out. And if content's at the table, they can ensure the messaging is crafted the right way and out to production.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. So, looking forward, I can jump into, our next slide that we have here, but, can you walk us through how you actually go about developing a messaging strategy for these crisis situations? I know you talked about the need for it in the beginning, but can you actually get a little more granular in the actual process of creating it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this actually involved a lot of conversations when we talk about what type of situations will you message for. So previously, I want to say like 3 or 4 years ago, we would have a hurricane or something big coming up that we'd want to message to our customers. As time went on, unfortunately, there was more and more things that were happening. And unfortunately, there was the shootings and there was all these different type of things going on. And sometimes we would message and then sometimes we wouldn't, but that got us in trouble because it made it seem like we were taking a stance because we did one and not the other. And it really got to a point we were messaging a lot on our homepage, and then the messages were just getting like longer and longer and longer and longer. And we really had to come back and say, what is our point of our messaging? Like, why are we messaging? Just, there has to be more to it than saying our hearts are out there for you, which is what we used to say. So after taking a look at it, what we have decided as a company was that we would message at the point that Cigna was actually offering benefits to our customers. So for example, if there was a hurricane or a natural disaster and a customer had to evacuate, they need to get the prescription before they go. So we waive the penalty for early prescriptions once they evacuate and they have to go see a doctor, we waive the out of network. So once a crisis gets big enough, when it gets large enough that Cigna as a company decides that they're going to offer additional benefits, that's at the point where okay, this is worthy of our messaging. And our message really is about our customers, which I'll get into our audience, but it's really to help them in the time of need. So it also helps with our brand. Like, we know that you're struggling. We know this is challenging. We are here to help you. And this is what we're doing, making these accommodations to help you during this difficult time. Another thing that we do a lot is we open up our behavioral health lines, and we actually offer these up to customers and non-customers so that if you need some help or support, we have 800 numbers. We have them staffed for people that are there to help guide you during difficult times. And so part of that is actually determining that who is your primary audience that you're targeting for. And you have to be really careful about this because what I was just saying is, like, when we go to .com, we're really targeting our customers or our B2B clients, not necessarily the media, not, journalists. And you have to be careful what that tone and voice of your messaging is, because we were kind of combining it all before, where we'd be like, oh, we're sorry that you were hit and we're going to offer you these benefits. But also Cigna donated like 500,000 to Red Cross, and so the feedback we got from investors were like, we don't care. We're trying to pack our house, we don't want to get. Yeah. So that was really where we said, okay, that kind of stuff should do on newsroom and press releases. And what we're targeting for is really our customers. And that kind of drives me to your channels. And this is kind of thing, like you said, you think would be like, basic, but you'll be surprised at how many companies don't think through what your channels that you're messaging, and that you have a holistic customer experience. So for example, if you're going to we put some messaging on .com, but if there's a news release going out, we ensure that we link to the news release or the news release back to .com with the additional information. If there's social media going out, that we all have consistent messaging, that they're all linking to the same place as well. And what we did for Cigna is after these crises kept coming, we actually started what we called Disaster Resource Center. And that was what we use as a central hub that we would put all the information. And then all the different channels would push traffic to those pages. And the good thing about that was we'd have one cohesive spot of messaging, but it was consistent. We didn't have different areas of the company going out and doing different messaging. It all brought people together. And then it was also only one place that we had to continually update. We didn't have to go to all these different places, try to remember update. That is something that we ran in the past, is when you have all this information out there and there's a change, which ones are updated and which ones aren't. By having a one central location, we're only able to change it one time and have it there for our customers. And another part of that is we talk about messaging. We're really messaging a lot to our customers. So you would think maybe we would put it in their login area where they go to find their benefits. But we choose to actually put it on the .com side, the public side, so that in their time of need, when they're really struggling, they're not worried about trying to find their passcode or their username, right? So we have the information right there ready for them. And really, before you start to message, I think a really important thing is really, what is the goal of your messaging? Is it just to say, hey, we're a company, we have feelings too? Or do you really have a benefit? And what is it that you want the users to do? And there are some things for your company as well. So for us, a lot of times we want our customers to go to the hub and read and get the right information, so they're not just calling our 1-800 numbers for our customer service, because our customer service gets overloaded. So we actually use this messaging to achieve some business goals. For example, we don't obviously want everybody running to the ER all the time, so we might push them towards virtual care or healthcare. So we also take into some goals of the company to in that messaging, so that we're driving people to the right action. But we also, the goal is to let our customers, from a brand perspective, to know that we are there for them. We know that they're struggling and we're here to help them through it.
Yeah, that's all really good points. And like you said, dividing and conquering a little bit as well, having those centralized resource hubs makes a lot of sense. So it's like a main repository to always go back into. I think those are really crucial and really helpful. And it kind of alludes into the next piece of this as well. I know everybody kind of has this fatigue when it comes to everything going on with COVID, but now that we're getting back into the second wave that they so strongly predicted, some will even call it a third wave because of what we had in the summer, and it's becoming ever more relevant again. I did notice way back when all this first hit in March and April, you guys did a really good job of your messaging, making sure everything was right up on Cigna.com, and you had this dedicated COVID resource hub immediately where everything was there. Can you talk a little bit through kind of that messaging strategy that your team used, especially with something like COVID? And again, like I said, I know we all have a little exhaustion with it. It just seems to be the most recent and easiest case study, if you will, to articulate and be top of mind and very relevant to a lot of people that will be either attending or hopefully, tuning into the recording of this afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's an example where we started out with some messaging in our disaster resource center and then we reassessed as time went on. And it's a sort of a funny joke within my team, because back in January, when we were starting to hear about coronavirus and COVID, it was mostly was international. And I remember meeting to my team, like, do you think, should we raise this up to be messaging at Cigna.com? We're like, oh, it's international. It won't affect us. Don't worry about it. And then like 4 weeks later, we're working nights and weekends building out this center. So that was a learning experience for us. But so when we start with Disaster Resource Center, with someone I was saying before, it's important to get messaging up at the time. You want to beat your competitors. You want to be first to market. You want to, let your customers know that you're active and you're there as a company. But as time went on, it was obvious that a lot more information needed. And how would we get all this information to our different audiences without just having one long scrolling page? And you don't want to do PDFs because they're not searchable and findable, and you want people to find the information. So we actually built out this coronavirus resource center, and each of the different sections actually speaks to that specific audience. So for example, for individuals and families, we have content there about, are your tests covered? How would you get tests? And then also what a symptom checker, right? So if somebody wants to come in and kind of go through the checker to see what the next step, and some of that is actually attached to a nurse line. So if you're going through and then you're testing positive, somebody can give you a call. So all of that is for like the individual customers. But then we also have our employers, right? Our big clients. And so we built a hub with information for them. And that information is going to be different. That information is going to be, how do they get their employees back to work? Are their employers covered? How do you, if they do get back to work, how do you make sure it is a safe environment for them? And also for our Medicare and Medicaid customers who are over 65, some of the benefits might vary a little bit, and also our providers are different. So we wouldn't want our Medicare and Medicaid coming to individual family and not finding the information that they need. And then our final audience was really healthcare providers. And this is really to talk about reimbursements and how, what different things that we'll cover. And, I think everybody knows everyone went to virtual health. So there's information about our reimbursements for virtual health during COVID. And this part really, it's we had daily calls where things were coming in, because the whole thing is, as a company, they're making decisions, right? And even like politically, there's decisions made, there's things we had to cover, there was changes. So every day we had a stand-up call. We'd bring in everyone was provided from all the various stakeholders, from senior leaders. We'd take it away. People were having to dedicate their time. We had to put other projects on hold and work throughout the day and get this information up and launched. And it was sort of an iterative process to get to this full place of this full resource center.
Yeah, no, and I don't think you were unique in that situation where everybody was kind of running into being ripped away from other things that they're working on. But, obviously, I think it made a lot of sense with everything that you've articulated so far about kind of having that direct alignment. I'm sure this put that directly into practice and made sure that everybody was in a common voice and everybody was talking about the same thing. And as much as you didn't necessarily need as much speed in this situation, you also didn't want to be the quote laggard. Where you were the one where all your competitors are out there putting out about how we're going to help, all the different things that we're going to do and offer our clients and our customers everything they need. You needed to do everything you could to get that messaging out there and making sure that, as this alludes to right here, you're aligning directly with your brand, your overall brand tone and voice, from the beginning and not necessarily changing that too dramatically, in this crisis situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we're talking about tone of voice. I think it's really important when you're messaging that you sound authentic, that you're using your company tone of voice and not come off with a totally different one, and where you're going to seem fake. And, studies show that consistent messaging builds credibility and trust with customers and with users. So my team and I, we developed this digital content standards. It's a public site. There's a URL right on the slide. And really, this is what we use all the time about how to write for digital throughout the enterprise. Cigna is a big company. There's over 70,000 employees. So even though we have the enterprise site, there's sites all over the place. There's different messaging. And this is a way that we ensure that throughout the enterprise that people are using the best practices and the right tone of voice, the words we use. And part of this with COVID or coronavirus, we noticed that people are all through the company were using different names, coronavirus with a lowercase c, or the corona, or whatever, the virus, or SARS, or whatever there was. And so we pulled together, we came up with a strategy for how, as an enterprise, we would name it, and we take a lot into consideration. And it's actually kind of funny that you have to be careful about when you do competitive research, because we had come out with something, and based on we have a tool that we check our search terms, what people are searching for, right? That's our first indicator. Like, what is the term our customers are using? Because that's the term that we have to be showing them, because they're not going to know what we mean if we use something different than what they're using for. So, and I forget what the term, we came out with something, and then clinical came back saying, no, you can't use that term because that's not actually what we're covering. We're like, oh, geez, okay. But it was funny. So after we took it down, we noticed our competitors still had it up. So they must have copied us. We're like, oh, don't always copy what we do. But yeah, so it was important to really kind of set the tone, and we put it right in our digital content standards of like how you word for coronavirus and what you should be using the wording for, and as well as all the other kind of clear communication. And yeah, over here, we're talking about the coronavirus hub, and the traffic was, we've had over 1.3 million people so far to the hub. Yeah, that was probably as of November 1st. And I think within the first month, we had like 100,000. So it really performed really well. It was obviously really needed. I mean, there's been a lull, right, since it was first up till now. But I'm sure now as the vaccinations they're talking about that, it'll start uplifting. But you think about how much maybe our phone lines were incredibly overloaded, right? So the goal was also to alleviate some of those phone lines, but also to offer our customers some trust in us. I mean, as a healthcare company, obviously we have to probably do a little more than other companies, but we wanted to ensure that we were doing it for all of the audiences so that they could all find the information that they needed so that they could better manage their own health. I mean, obviously, as a healthcare company, and there's value for us to ensuring that people follow the right steps so that, we can try to keep them healthy from a healthcare perspective.
Yeah, no, and that's a big responsibility for you guys. And like I said, even though there is a little bit of that fatigue, even though it's circling back around, I mean, being right at the forefront and being, a healthcare provider and things like that, this is something that was, thrown right on your guys' lap. Yeah. Everybody was affected, but immediately people started to look inward and say, okay, what were to happen, or what's going to happen if I were to, happenstance get it, to catch it, and what are my coverages, what if I encounter someone, how is my testing available, am I covered, through working with Cigna and all that kind of stuff. So having a centralized area where someone's confident and comfortable going to, and having that correct uniform message, I think is something that was probably really crucial for you guys internally, and looks like you guys did a good job aligning. So
yeah, and I think that I think that it's kind of taken for granted that companies know how to message, and I didn't realize there was a gap until I think I was seeing one of our vendors that we use a lot of clients, and they came to us and said they don't really know how to message for this. They don't know how to do a strategy. It's sort of like hit everyone blindsided. So that's why it's always good. I mean, you couldn't plan ahead for the pandemic. We didn't know, but you don't know. But it is good lesson that the key is really to get messaging up quick and fast, and not spinning around with like different decision makers, or I always call it writing by committee, right? Everybody's got to weigh in and see what they want to say, that you have a plan so that when it does occur, you are there. And it's, again, you do have to be flexible, because even though we had said that when Cigna's offering benefits is kind of our line where then we would do some messaging, but like for the social unrest or injustice, right, that part, we really didn't offer benefits, but that was a different theme that we're like, okay, we still think it's worthy to do some messaging. So that's why I always say, even though you kind of set these guidelines, you really kind of have to see what's going out in the world and how it affects the company, and does it add value to implement some messaging to represent what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's a good point. And I know people have been kind of popping in and out of the session, so I will still invite people. We have a few minutes. If you do have any questions that you wanted to ask, definitely feel free to put them in the chat. But based on something you and I discussed a little bit as we were prepping for this, I did want to ask you one question, Lauren, because it was very interesting of what you or kind of what you articulated to me and kind of how you built it. I know one of the things that was core to the messaging strategy was also making sure that you were doing that from a bilingual standpoint. You
Oh,
talked about
you're
how
right. You're right.
having a big Spanish speaking client base and wanting to make sure that you do everything you could from a multilingual standpoint, again,
Yeah.
particularly in Spanish, was really important to you. So can you talk about that
Yeah.
a little bit more and the multicultural aspect of building up that branding strategy and making sure that your hub was available, ready, and able to share that share that content over what's most easily consumable for a lot of people, because something like healthcare we've talked about can be very convoluted, can be very tough to read, can be really not in a lot of people's mind space. So finding something that's in your native language rather than your
Yeah.
secondary language can be really crucial for you. So if you could articulate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I actually have that in my notes and glazed right over it, so apologies. So I'm a real strong advocate for Spanish translations. I actually pushed it through on Cigna last year. We launched Cigna.com all in Spanish. And it was really important to me that when this happened, that we were actually messaging to our Spanish speaking community as well. I did get some pushback, to be honest, because, things fast and, cost and capacity. And I'm like, no, we're going to do this. I have two bilingual people on my team, and they were painstaking about ensuring, because we didn't just do like a word for word Google Translate. They want to ensure that the messaging was behind it so that the community really could understand what needed to be done, so that they could take care of themselves as well. And so every time an update, so we keep it a one for one, not word for word translate, but the content we update in English, we ensure that we also have in Spanish. So as we're constantly making these updates in English, we're always constantly updating in Spanish. And we've actually, our traffic in our Spanish sites, like, you're probably gonna think I'm lying, but like increased like by 1,000%. Like, well, because we launched last year, it took a while to come up, but now we're getting a lot of traffic as we're coming through. And it's even more important that we show our commitment to our Spanish speaking community, like what we do for time and resource capacity for English, we're also going to do for our Spanish speaking community. And so, yes, it was really important. And we still, my team is constantly working on English updates as well as the Spanish to kind of keep that consistency and to help the Spanish speaking community as well.
Yeah, and that's obviously really important as well. Kind of like I said, it's really important that you're spending time and you're focusing on all of your clients. And like I said, with healthcare being something that, I mean, I even struggle trying to figure out what my coverage is and what we have. I have two young kids, so it's understanding how are they covered and everything that's going on. I could only imagine trying to do that in something that isn't even my first language. So understanding the large population that we have in the U.S. that is Spanish speaking first, or their native language is Spanish, that has to be something that is really, really helpful. And I think it's just really good for as a brand for you guys to offer and bring to the table, and kind of shows again, you were the one to bring it to the table, but shows kind of the values that your brand show or has overall for you to be able to do that. Because like you said, you're not doing a one-for-one Google Translate and throwing something up. So there are hard costs that are incurred with that. So for the ability for Cigna to want to overall invest in a strategy like that definitely speaks volumes and says a lot about you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And then we do have one quick question from Matthew Wasley, who's on our team, if you wanted to jump into it. But he said, so what type of feedback have you received from your audience about the hub? I assume that Matthew means the COVID hub.
Yeah.
And has it evolved since its original inception?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Matthew, for your question. And so I was kind of mentioned at the beginning, we'd have a disaster resource center we put everything into right now. And we had done some initial messaging in the disaster resource center, but as time went on and there was more and more information, we started to build out a hub, and it really has evolved and evolved. We've redone this hub many times, and I even want to mention it's been painstaking. And I feel bad because a lot of people on the team have kids and they're trying to homeschool and trying to do all this. So it was a lot of nights and weekends because as we got, we started out with, let's take out the disaster resource center and let's have a specific one for coronavirus, but it wasn't broken out by audience at first, right? So we're just putting information, but then the information was getting really hard for people to read, was really hard for them to find the information. So from there, we said, well, now we need to break it out for specific audiences, because not only did our customers need it stuff, but our employers, the employers that ensure their employees, who are also our customers, but they needed help knowing how to help with their workforce with it, and then the healthcare professionals, and then the Medicare. So yeah, it was definitely an iterative phase to get where we are, and it's one thing that we've had to, was not a one and done. We had to look at it as things change. It's just kind of a every day looking at it, what's happened in the world, what's happening, the virus, how is it going, and then reassess the content and add and keep evolving it from them. And yeah, we've gotten, like I said, we've had a lot of traffic at the beginning as far as our audience feedback. It's actually been really highly regarded, especially from the employees, because we have some symptom checkers. We have information on how people go to virtual care, because otherwise their employees were coming into their HR department, right? So we kind of help to offlift some of that burden and to actually just give some guidance out there. And then we also added, a buoy symptom checker. And so it's this kind of thing that, it was new to all of us that we played around with. And people have found it really helpful and resourceful. We had, like I said, a lot of traffic at the beginning. Then it lulled, then we got a lot more traffic. Now it's a little bit of a lull, but we'll be redoing it again as we go into hopefully the next phase fast with vaccinations, or I think after we get through this next phase, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully soon. Yeah, and that's really interesting because again, it kind of plays into, and it's a nice cap off of this discussion. It kind of plays into what you talked about earlier, because everything that you just talked about obviously showcases that it's more than just the content team or the marketing team that have their hands all over that COVID resource hub, or that hub itself. There are many different players internally, like you said, where you're talking about health checks and things like that, and where can I go to get a test, and a lot of different people collaborating. So having that strategy on the back end and having that strategy implemented had to have really helped as you continue to evolve this, as again, this pandemic and this crisis isn't a short one, because again, that's one of the things that we see typically when you run into these crisis situations. Typically it's a few days, maybe a few weeks, and it's a little more on the shorter end. And then you can kind of move on to something else, where this is now stretching into a vast majority of 2020 so far. I mean, it's consumed by at least 8 months of this year. And like you said, it's consumed the whole year if you look at it from really its inception in terms of being an international virus, mostly out in China, so far, even into early January at this point, and everybody talking about it then. So consumed a good chunk of the year. So
yeah, and it's outside of this, we've had situations like there was a big hurricane coming, or I think recently there was like 3 that was going to hit, and we had gotten onto the crisis. We actually have a crisis team where we talk about what's about to hit, and we kind of what's projected to happen, what the damage. And so we did some messaging on the homepage and drove up to the right place. And then it was like 3 days later, nobody was even talking about it. It was like, you know what I mean? So we had built up all this work, and it was like, all right, so we left it on, and then we're like, all right, we need to move it off. But sometimes it goes the other way. Sometimes it starts out with something small where you think, oh, it won't bother us. It's all the way in, it's international, not here. Yeah. And before you know it, it's fully blown out. So it's also a thing that, your messaging strategy, part of it really should be is continuously watching, maintaining, doing customer competitive research, also looking what's out in the world, so that you're updating the messaging and that you're not getting stale. You also don't want to throw out messaging and then just leave it there, because that hurts your credibility even more when people come and like, why are they still talking about that? It's no longer relevant. So it's not only getting it up there, but it's also making sure you're editing or taking it down when you need to. And I do want to apologize for the technical issue. It's part of working for a healthcare company with the firewall, so you never know where the firewall is going to come. But that's just one of the advantages.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm happy we're still able to kind of get through this discussion, and I know as a team we'll try and share this out with people that weren't able to join us live. And if that is the fact, and you've stuck with us for this long, and you are seeing this recording, I am sharing Lauren's contact info right here on the screen. I know she's more than welcome to field some questions or some follow up. You can always reach out on LinkedIn. Reach out to the Knotch team, any one of us, and we're happy to get you in contact or whatever. But again, thank you very much, Lauren, for sticking with us and sticking through the difficulties.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thank you for joining.
Yep. Have a great afternoon.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.